The afternoon sun cast long shadows on Morrison Street when it happened. A blind man, tapping his white cane along the cracked sidewalk, collided with three young men loitering outside a convenience store. They didn't apologize. Instead, they circled him like wolves sensing weakness, mocking his stumbling steps, his apologetic voice, the worn leather bag slung across his shoulder. Within seconds, they shoved him hard against the brick wall. His cane clattered to the pavement. One of them yanked the bag from his grip, while another rifled through his jacket pockets, laughing as the blind man reached into empty air, disoriented and terrified. Pedestrians walked past, cars slowed but didn't stop. Nobody intervened, but someone was watching. A lone motorcyclist idling at the red light 50 feet away saw everything. His name was Marcus Vale, a man who rode to forget, who kept his head down and his past buried. But something about the way the blind man fell to his knees, hands outstretched and trembling, shattered the silence Marcus had built around himself. He didn't think, he just moved. What happened next was captured by 3 different security cameras and a bystander's smartphone. Within hours, the footage spread across continents, not because of violence, but because of what it revealed, that honor still exists in a world that often looks away, that some promises are kept without words, that justice doesn't always wear a badge. This is the story of a man who chose to act when everyone else chose silence. And in doing so, he reminded the world what it means to stand up, when standing up costs something. If you're moved by stories of real courage and moral action, stay with us through all 9 chapters. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Morrison Street wasn't the kind of place where people lingered. It was a grey artery cutting through the eastern edge of the city, flanked by dollar stores with barred windows and apartment buildings tagged with fading graffiti. The afternoon heat pressed down like a hand, and the sidewalk shimmered with the kind of exhaustion that only concrete in late summer can hold. Marcus Vale sat at the intersection on his black Harley-Davidson, engine rumbling low beneath him like a caged heartbeat. His helmet visor was up, and his eyes tracked the traffic light with the blank patience of someone who had learned to wait. For nothing in particular, just wait. He'd been riding for 3 hours, no destination, no plan, just motion, just distance from the things he didn't want to think about. To his right, a convenience store squatted under a torn awning. 3 young men stood outside, sharing a cigarette and blocking the entrance with the careless arrogance of people who had never been told no. They wore basketball shorts and oversized shirts, faces shadowed beneath fitted caps. They weren't doing anything illegal, not yet, just taking up space, the way certain people do when they've decided the world owes them room. Marcus didn't care. He'd seen 1,000 versions of them in 1,000 cities. He kept his eyes forward. Then he heard the collision. It wasn't loud, just the soft thud of a body meeting an obstacle, followed by a startled apology. Marcus turned his head. An older man had walked straight into one of the 3 loiterers, his white cane sweeping the ground too late to catch the contact. The blind man stepped back quickly, one hand raised in a gesture of contrition. "I'm so sorry," the man said, his voice high and nervous. "I didn't see you there. I'm sorry." The young men didn't move. They stared at him with the flat, predatory stillness of animals sizing up prey. One of them, the tallest, with a gold chain glinting at his throat, smiled slowly. "You didn't see me?" he said, voice dripping with mock surprise. "No shit, old man. You're blind." The other 2 laughed. The blind man's face flushed red. He nodded quickly, fumbling for his cane where it had slipped from his grip. "Yes, I'm sorry. I'll just—" "Hold up," the tall one said, stepping into his path. "You bump into me, you don't just walk away. That's disrespectful." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The light turned green. Cars behind him honked, but he didn't move. He cut the engine and planted both boots on the asphalt, eyes locked on the scene unfolding 30 yards away. The blind man's hands were shaking now. "I didn't mean any disrespect. Please, I just need to get home." "Yeah?" The tall one glanced at his friends. "Maybe you should pay a fine for bumping into people." One of the others, shorter, wiry, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, reached out and tapped the leather bag hanging from the blind man's shoulder. "Nice bag. That real leather?" "It's just a bag," the man stammered. "Please, I don't want any trouble." "Too late for that," the scarred one said, and then he shoved him. The blind man stumbled backward, arms pinwheeling, and his back slammed into the brick wall of the convenience store. His cane clattered to the ground. He reached out blindly, fingers grasping at air, trying to orient himself. The three men closed in like a tightening noose. Marcus swung his leg off the bike. The tallest one grabbed the strap of the leather bag and yanked it hard. The blind man cried out, but his grip was weak and the bag tore free. The scarred one went for his pockets, pulling out a wallet, loose bills, a set of keys. The third, silent until now, just stood there smiling, phone in hand, filming the whole thing like it was a prank video. "Please," the blind man begged, his voice breaking. "That's all I have. Please." No one answered. They were already backing away, laughing, the bag swinging from the tall one's hand like a trophy. And that's when Marcus stepped into the street. His boots hit the pavement with the deliberate weight of someone who had made a decision. He didn't run, didn't shout. He just walked, slow, steady, inevitable, across the 4 lanes of traffic, ignoring the honking horns and the screeching brakes. His eyes never left the 3 men. One of them noticed him first, the scarred one. He nudged the tall one and jerked his chin toward Marcus. "Yo, we got company." The tall one turned, saw the biker, saw the look on his face, and for the first time his smile faltered. Marcus stopped 5 feet away. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, hands loose at his sides, breathing steady, eyes cold as river stone. The silence stretched long enough to ache. Then Marcus spoke, voice low and hard as iron. "Give it back." The tall one with the gold chain blinked, as if he hadn't quite heard correctly. "What'd you say?" Marcus didn't repeat himself. He just stared, unblinking, his presence filling the space between them like a slow-building storm. Behind him, his Harley sat abandoned in the middle of the street, hazard lights blinking, traffic backing up in both directions. Nobody honked anymore. Drivers had stopped and were watching through windshields, phones out, recording. The scarred one tried to laugh it off. "Man, this ain't your business. Keep walking." "I'm not walking," Marcus said. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it, something that made the air feel heavier, colder. "And you're going to give him his things back, right now." The third one, the silent one with the phone, finally lowered the device and stepped forward. "Or what, old man? You gonna fight all 3 of us?" Marcus didn't flinch. "I won't have to." The tall one tried to reclaim his confidence. He straightened up, puffed his chest, and held the leather bag higher, like a challenge. This is ours now. Finder's fee for getting bumped into." "That's not how it works," Marcus said quietly. "Yeah, who's gonna stop us, you?" "If I have to." The scarred one laughed again, but it sounded hollow now. "You're crazy, man." "Maybe." Marcus took 1 step forward, just one, but it was enough to make all 3 of them take a step back. Behind Marcus, the blind man was still pressed against the wall, trembling, one hand clutching his chest, as if trying to hold himself together. His cane lay broken at his feet. He couldn't see what was happening, but he could hear it. The shift in voices, the rising tension, the presence of someone who had stepped into the space where everyone else had walked away. "Who are you?" the blind man whispered, his voice cracking. Marcus didn't turn around. "Someone who saw." The tall one's face twisted into something uglier now. Fear masked as anger. "You think you're some kind of hero? You think this is a movie?" "No," Marcus said. "I think you're 3 cowards who picked the wrong man to rob." The scarred one lunged first. He came fast, fist cocked back, aiming for Marcus's jaw. But Marcus had been waiting for it. He sidestepped, smooth and effortless, and the punch sailed past him into empty air. Before the scarred one could recover, Marcus grabbed his wrist, twisted it hard, and drove him face first into the brick wall beside the blind man. The impact was loud. The scarred one crumpled to the ground, groaning, blood streaming from his nose. The tall one dropped the bag and swung wildly. Marcus ducked under the punch, pivoted, and drove his elbow into the man's ribs with surgical precision. The tall one doubled over, gasping, and Marcus shoved him backward into a row of metal trash cans. They clattered and rolled, the sound echoing down the street. The third one, the silent one, hesitated. His phone was still in his hand, still recording. His eyes darted between Marcus and his two friends, both down, both groaning. Then he did the only smart thing he'd done all day. He ran. Marcus didn't chase him. He just stood there, breathing steady, fists unclenched, watching the man disappear around the corner. The scarred one tried to get up, but Marcus stepped over him without a glance and picked up the leather bag. He walked to the blind man, who was still pressed against the wall, shaking like a leaf in a windstorm. "It's over," Marcus said gently. He placed the bag into the man's hands. "You're safe now." The blind man's fingers closed around the strap, and a sob broke free from his chest, deep, guttural, the kind that comes from holding too much fear for too long. "Thank you," he whispered. "Oh God, thank you." Marcus knelt and gathered the scattered contents from the ground, wallet, keys, loose bills. He placed them carefully into the man's trembling hands. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. "Harold," the man said, voice still shaking. "Harold Brennan." "I'm Marcus." He stood and gently guided Harold away from the wall. "Can you walk?" Harold nodded, though his legs were unsteady. "I think so. I need a moment." "Take your time." Around them a small crowd had gathered, bystanders who had been too afraid to intervene, but were now filming, murmuring, some even clapping. Marcus ignored them. He kept his hand on Harold's shoulder, steadying him, waiting until the older man's breathing slowed. "Why did you help me?" Harold asked quietly. Nobody else did. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Because someone helped me once, when I needed it. And I made myself a promise." "What promise?" "That I'd never walk past someone in trouble again." Harold's lips trembled. Tears spilled down his weathered cheeks. "You're a good man." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't feel like a good man. He felt like someone trying to pay a debt that could never be repaid, but he stayed with Harold until the police arrived, and when they asked for his statement, he gave it without hesitation. And when the footage from the security cameras and the bystanders' phones started spreading online, showing everything, from the robbery to the confrontation to Marcus kneeling beside Harold, he didn't ask for credit. He just got back on his bike and rode away. "We're in Phoenix, Arizona right now, and it's 4:47 p.m. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what you think of Marcus's choice." By the time Marcus made it home that night, the video had already been viewed 3 million times. He didn't know that yet. He didn't check social media, didn't scroll through feeds or click on trending hashtags. He parked his Harley in the narrow alley behind his apartment building, climbed the rusted fire escape to the 3rd floor, and let himself into the small studio he'd been renting for the past 2 years. One room, a mattress on the floor, a desk with a lamp, no TV. No distractions. He peeled off his jacket, tossed it onto the desk, and stood at the window, looking out at the city lights blinking in the distance like scattered embers. His knuckles ached from the brief fight, and there was a dull throb in his ribs where the tall one had managed to land a glancing blow. Nothing serious, just reminders. He tried to think about dinner, about sleep, about anything other than the look on Harold Brennan's face when he'd asked, "Why did you help me?" Because the truth was complicated, and Marcus didn't like complicated. 3 states away, in a cramped newsroom in Chicago, a young reporter named Elena Vasquez was scrolling through her Twitter feed when she saw the video for the first time. It had been posted by an account called Street Eyes Daily, with the caption, "Blind man robbed in broad daylight, bystanders did nothing. Then this biker showed up." Elena clicked play. The footage was grainy, shot from across the street on someone's phone, but the sequence of events was clear. The three men circling Harold. The shove, the theft, and then the figure in black leather crossing the street like he had all the time in the world. Calm, deliberate, unstoppable. Elena watched the confrontation, watched the way Marcus didn't escalate, didn't throw the first punch, but responded with precision when violence came to him. Watched him kneel beside Harold, placing the stolen items back into the old man's hands with the care of someone returning something sacred. She replayed it 3 times. Then she forwarded it to her editor with a single line. This is the kind of story people need right now. By midnight, the video had been shared by news outlets in 7 countries. CNN picked it up. So did the BBC. Local stations across the United States ran it on their evening broadcasts, accompanied by interviews with bystanders who had witnessed the confrontation. "I've never seen anything like it," one woman said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Everyone just walked past that poor man. But this biker, he didn't hesitate. He just acted." A convenience store clerk who had been inside during the robbery told reporters, "I saw it on the security monitor. I was about to call the cops, but by the time I got to the phone, it was already over. That guy didn't mess around." And Harold Brennan, reached by phone at his home, said simply, "He saved me. Not just from being robbed, from feeling like I was invisible, like my suffering didn't matter. He made me visible again." The internet did what the internet does best. It amplified. Hashtags trended, memes were created, think pieces were written about bystander apathy, about the erosion of communal responsibility, about the quiet heroism of ordinary people. But nobody knew who Marcus Vale was. He hadn't given interviews, hadn't posed for photos. The police had his statement, but they weren't releasing his name. He was a ghost, a nameless figure in black leather who had appeared, done what needed to be done, and vanished. The next morning, Marcus woke to the sound of someone pounding on his door. He sat up slowly, blinking against the sunlight streaming through the window. The pounding came again, harder this time, accompanied by a voice. "Marcus Vale, this is Channel 9 News. We'd like to speak with you about the incident on Morrison Street." Marcus's stomach dropped. He stood, crossed the room in 3 strides, and peered through the peephole. A woman with a microphone stood outside, flanked by a cameraman. Behind them, he could see another news van pulling up to the curb. He didn't open the door. "Mr. Vale, people are calling you a hero. They want to hear your story. Just 5 minutes of your time?" Marcus turned away and walked to the window. Below, on the street, a small crowd had gathered. Some held signs. One read, "Thank you, biker hero." Another, "Real men stand up." He felt something twist in his chest. Not pride, not satisfaction. Something darker, something that felt like exposure. He grabbed his jacket, pulled on his boots, and climbed out the fire escape window. Elena Vasquez was the one who found him. She didn't knock on his door or shout questions from the sidewalk. She waited 3 hours in a coffee shop 2 blocks from his apartment until she saw him walk in, head down, hood pulled over his face. She approached his table carefully, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Mind if I sit?" Marcus looked up. His eyes were tired, wary. "Depends. You a reporter?" "Guilty." She set 1 cup in front of him. "But I'm not here to make you famous. I'm here because I think there's more to this story than a viral video." Marcus stared at the coffee. "There's not." "I think there is." Elena sat down across from him. "I did some digging. Found out you used to be a firefighter. 20 years on the force. You pulled people out of burning buildings, saved lives. Then one day you just quit, moved to a new city, started over. Why?" Marcus didn't answer. "Because something happened," Elena said quietly. "Something that made you walk away." Marcus lifted the coffee to his lips, took a slow sip. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper. "I couldn't save someone who mattered, and I've been trying to make up for it ever since." Elena nodded slowly. "Is that why you helped Harold?" "I helped Harold because no one else would, but you're not looking for credit. You didn't want to be found." "No." "So why did you do it?" Marcus met her eyes then, and for the first time, Elena saw something beneath the weariness, something raw and unhealed, because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. Drop a like if you believe in people like Marcus, the ones who act when everyone else looks away. Elena Vasquez's article ran 2 days later under the headline, "The Ghost Rider, Who is the Man Behind the Viral Video?" It wasn't a puff piece. She didn't paint Marcus as a flawless hero or ignore the complexity of his past. Instead, she told the truth, or as much of it as Marcus had been willing to share. She wrote about his 20 years as a firefighter, about the hundreds of lives he'd saved, and about the one life he couldn't save, his partner, a man named Daniel Cortez, who had died in a warehouse fire while Marcus was forced to retreat due to structural collapse. She wrote about the guilt that had followed him, the way it had hollowed him out from the inside until he couldn't stand to wear the uniform anymore. And she wrote about what he'd told her in that coffee shop. "I couldn't save Daniel, but I can still choose to show up for people who need it. That's all I'm trying to do." The article went viral within hours, not because it was sensational, but because it was honest. People didn't just see a biker who had confronted 3 thieves. They saw a man trying to outrun his own grief by doing the one thing he still knew how to do: help. Comments poured in by the thousands. "This is what real strength looks like. We need more people like Marcus in this world. He didn't save Harold for the cameras. He saved him because it was the right thing to do." But not everyone was inspired. Buried among the praise were darker voices, people who questioned Marcus's motives, who called him a vigilante, who claimed he had used excessive force against the thieves. One comment, posted by an anonymous account, read, "Heroes don't run from the spotlight. If he was really doing this for the right reasons, he'd own it." Marcus read that comment sitting in the same coffee shop where Eleanor had interviewed him. He stared at the screen for a long time, then closed the laptop. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just trying to survive his own conscience. Meanwhile, Harold Brennan's life had changed in ways he hadn't expected. The day after the video went viral, a local non-profit that provided services for the visually impaired reached out to him. They offered to replace his broken cane, free of charge, and connected him with a mobility coach who could help him navigate the city more safely. A crowdfunding campaign, started by someone Harold had never met, raised $40,000 to cover his medical expenses and living costs. Harold wept when he heard the number. Not because of the money, but because he had felt invisible for so long, and now, suddenly, people saw him. But more than anything, Harold wanted to find Marcus, to thank him properly, to tell him that what he had done mattered not just in the moment, but in every moment since. He reached out to Elena, who passed along a message. A week later, Marcus called him. They met at a park near the river. Harold sat on a bench, hands folded over the handle of his new cane, listening to the sound of water lapping against the stones. When Marcus arrived, Harold heard the crunch of boots on gravel and turned his head. "Marcus?" he said. "Yeah, it's me." Harold stood and extended his hand. Marcus took it, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Harold said, "I wanted to thank you, properly, not just for getting my things back, but for making me feel like I mattered." Marcus's throat tightened. "You do matter. I didn't feel like it that day. I felt like a burden, like something people had to step around." Harold's voice wavered. "But you didn't step around me. You stepped toward me." Marcus looked out at the river, unable to meet Harold's unseeing gaze. "I just did what anyone should have done, but no one else did." Harold's grip on the cane tightened. "That's the point. You chose to act when everyone else chose silence. That's not nothing, Marcus. That's everything." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. So he just stood there, the weight of Harold's gratitude pressing down on him, like something he didn't deserve but couldn't refuse. "I'm glad you're okay," Marcus said finally. "I'm more than okay." Harold smiled, tears glistening in his clouded eyes. "I'm hopeful again. Because of you. They sat together for a while, watching the river flow past. Two men bound by a moment of violence that had somehow transformed into something gentler, something that felt like grace. Back in his apartment that night, Marcus found an envelope slipped under his door. No return address, just his name written in careful script. He opened it and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The message was handwritten. "Dear Marcus, you don't know me, but I saw what you did for that blind man. It reminded me of something my father used to say. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's the decision to act in spite of it. I lost my father 2 years ago. He was a firefighter like you. He died saving a family trapped in a burning building. I've spent the last 2 years angry at him for leaving, at the world for taking him, at myself for not saying goodbye. But watching you help a stranger, seeing you choose to do the hard thing when no one else would, it reminded me why my father did what he did, why people like you and him exist. Thank you for showing me that there's still honor in this world, that some people still keep the promises they make to themselves. A grateful stranger." Marcus read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and placed it on the desk beside the lamp. He didn't cry, but something in his chest loosened just a little, just enough to let him breathe. The viral fame that Marcus had never wanted found him anyway. Within days, his face was on local news broadcasts. His name was trending on social media, and people were stopping him on the street to shake his hand or ask for photos. He hated every second of it. He stopped going to the coffee shop, stopped answering his phone. He changed his route home from work and started wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes whenever he left the apartment. But it didn't matter. The world had decided he was a hero, and the world wasn't interested in his protests. Then the police called. Detective Laura Reyes introduced herself over the phone with a calm, professional tone. "Mr. Vale, I'm following up on the incident on Morrison Street. We've arrested 2 of the 3 suspects, the ones you subdued. The third is still at large, but we're confident we'll find him soon." "Okay," Marcus said. "Why are you calling me?" "Because one of the suspects is claiming you assaulted him without provocation. He's threatening to press charges." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "He robbed a blind man. I stopped him." "I know. And the video footage supports your version of events, but his lawyer is arguing that you used excessive force, that you could have called the police instead of taking matters into your own hands. He attacked me first. I believe you. But this is going to trial, Mr. Vale, and I need you to be prepared for that." Reyes paused. "I also need you to understand that once this goes public, people are going to have opinions. Some will support you, others will call you a vigilante. Are you ready for that?" Marcus closed his eyes. "No." "Good," Reyes said. "Then you're already smarter than most people in your position. Stay smart, and don't talk to the press without a lawyer present." She hung up. Marcus sat on the edge of his mattress, staring at the wall. He'd done the right thing. He knew that. But the right thing had a cost, and he was starting to realize just how high that cost might be. The trial began 3 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. News cameras lined the hallway outside, reporters jostling for position, voices overlapping in a cacophony of speculation and sound bites. Marcus sat at the defense table beside a public defender named Thomas Ling, who had agreed to represent him pro bono after reading Eleanor's article. On the prosecution's side sat Jerome Rome Carter, the tall one with the gold chain. He looked different now, clean-shaven, dressed in a button-down shirt and slacks, sitting with his hands folded and his face arranged in an expression of wounded innocence. His lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Hollis, was already painting him as the victim. "My client was minding his own business when Mr. Vale attacked him without warning," Hollis said during her opening statement. "Yes, there was a disagreement with Mr. Brennan. Yes, my client took property that didn't belong to him, but that does not give Mr. Vale the right to act as judge, jury, and executioner. We have laws in this country. We have police. Mr. Vale chose to ignore both." Thomas Ling rose to respond. He was younger than Marcus expected, no older than 30, but his voice carried the weight of someone who had been fighting uphill battles his entire life. "Mr. Vale didn't attack anyone," Ling said calmly. "He intervened to stop a crime in progress. When Mr. Carter and his accomplices assaulted him, Mr. Vale defended himself. That's not vigilantism. That's self-defense. And if more people had the courage to act the way Mr. Vale did, we'd live in a safer world." The trial lasted 3 days. Witnesses were called. The security footage was played. Harold Brennan took the stand and testified with quiet dignity, his voice steady even as he recounted the fear he'd felt that day. "I thought they were going to hurt me," Harold said, "maybe even kill me, and no one stopped them, no one except Marcus." Hollis tried to discredit him. "Mr. Brennan, you're blind. How can you be certain Mr. Vale didn't provoke the confrontation?" Harold's jaw tightened. "I may not be able to see, Ms. Hollis, but I'm not deaf. I heard everything. And I heard Marcus ask them to give my things back. I heard them attack him. I heard him defend himself. And I heard him help me when no one else would." The jury deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. "We find the defendant, Marcus Vale, not guilty on all charges." The courtroom erupted. Some people cheered, others booed. The judge banged his gavel and called for order, but the noise didn't stop until the bailiff escorted Marcus out through a side exit. Outside, Thomas Ling shook Marcus's hand. "You did good in there. You stayed calm, you told the truth, and the jury believed you." Marcus nodded, but he didn't feel victorious. He just felt tired. "What happens now?" he asked. Ling smiled. "Now you go home, and you try to live your life. And if more people come after me, more lawyers, more reporters, then you do what you've always done," Ling said. "You stand your ground, you do the right thing, and you don't apologize for it." Marcus wanted to believe that. He really did. If you're enjoying this story and want to see how it ends, hit that like button. It helps us keep making content like this. 2 months after the trial, Marcus received another letter. This one came certified mail, addressed in the same careful handwriting as the anonymous note he'd received weeks earlier. He opened it standing in the hallway outside his apartment, the envelope still warm from the courier's bag. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photograph was old, creased at the edges, showing a man in a firefighter's uniform standing beside a young boy. Both were smiling. The boy held a toy fire truck in one hand and had the other wrapped around the man's leg. Marcus stared at it for a long time before unfolding the letter. "Dear Marcus, my name is Samuel Torres. The man in this photograph is my father, Captain Eduardo Torres. He died saving a family from a burning building in 2023. You didn't know him, but he knew you. My father talked about you often. He said you were one of the best firefighters he'd ever worked with. He said you never gave up on anyone, no matter how bad things looked. He said you carried the weight of every person you couldn't save, and that it made you stronger, not weaker. When he died, I was angry. I blamed the job. I blamed him for choosing strangers over me, but watching what you did for Harold Brennan, I finally understood. My father didn't die because he loved strangers more than me. He died because he couldn't live with himself if he didn't try. Just like you couldn't live with yourself if you'd walked past Harold that day. I'm not angry anymore, Marcus. I'm proud of my father, and grateful for people like you who keep that same fire burning. Thank you for reminding me what honor looks like." Samuel Torres. Marcus's hands were shaking by the time he finished reading. He looked at the photograph again, at the boy's smile, at the pride in his father's eyes, and something broke open inside him, something he'd been holding closed for too long. He sat down on the hallway floor, back against the wall, and let himself cry. Not for Daniel, not for Eduardo, but for every person he'd carried with him, every ghost he'd tried to outrun, every promise he'd made and broken and remade. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus understood something he'd been too afraid to admit. He didn't have to carry it all alone. That night, He called Samuel Torres. They talked for 2 hours. Samuel told him about his father, the stories, the lessons, the quiet moments that had shaped who Eduardo was. And Marcus told Samuel about Daniel, about the fire, about the guilt that had driven him out of the profession he loved. "I don't know if I can ever forgive myself," Marcus said quietly. "You don't have to," Samuel replied. "You just have to keep showing up. That's what my father would have said. That's what you did for Harold, and that's enough." When they hung up, Marcus felt lighter, not healed but less heavy, like he'd set down a weight he'd been carrying for too long. The next morning, Marcus did something he hadn't done in months. He went for a ride without running from anything. He pointed his Harley west, toward the mountains, and let the road stretch out ahead of him like an open promise. The wind was cold, the sky was clear, and for the first time since Daniel's death, Marcus felt like he could breathe. He stopped at a diner just outside the city and ordered coffee. While he waited, an older man at the next table leaned over. "You're that biker, aren't you? The one from the video?" Marcus tensed. "Yeah." The man nodded slowly. "My grandson was bullied at school last year. Beat up so bad he didn't want to go back. I tried to tell him that standing up for yourself matters, but I don't think he believed me. Then he saw your video, saw you step in when no one else would. And something changed. He started standing up for himself, for others too." The man's eyes were wet. "You gave him courage. Thank you." Marcus didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. But as the man walked away, Marcus realized something. The ripples from that one moment on Morrison Street were still spreading, farther and wider than he'd ever imagined. And maybe that was the point. Maybe you didn't need to save everyone. You just needed to show up for one person and trust that one act of courage could inspire the next. 3 months after the trial, Marcus received a phone call from someone he'd never expected to hear from, Harold Brennan. "Marcus, I need to ask you something," Harold said, his voice steady but serious. "Can you meet me tomorrow at the community center on 5th Street? Is everything okay?" "More than okay. Just trust me, please." Marcus agreed. The next afternoon, Marcus pulled up to the Riverside Community Center, a squat brick building nestled between a library and a park. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, trying to figure out why Harold had asked him here. When he walked inside, he found the main hall filled with people, 40, maybe 50 of them, standing in clusters, talking quietly. At the front of the room, Harold stood beside a microphone, his new cane resting against a folding chair. Harold heard Marcus's boots on the linoleum and turned toward the sound. "Marcus, you came. You didn't give me much choice," Marcus said, trying to keep his tone light. "What's going on?" Harold smiled. "You'll see." He tapped the microphone and the room fell silent. All eyes turned toward the front. "Thank you all for coming," Harold began. 3 months ago, I was robbed in broad daylight. I was hurt, humiliated, and terrified. And the worst part wasn't the robbery itself. It was the fact that no one helped. People walked past me like I didn't exist, like my suffering didn't matter. He paused, his voice thickening with emotion. But one man stopped. One man chose to act. And because of him, I'm standing here today. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. He gave me back something I'd lost, the belief that people still care. Harold gestured toward Marcus. "Marcus Vale, would you come up here, please?" Marcus shook his head. "Harold, I don't—" "Please," Harold said, "just for a moment." Reluctantly, Marcus walked to the front of the room. The crowd parted to let him through, and when he reached Harold, the older man placed a hand on his shoulder. "I asked these people to come today because they all have something in common," Harold said. "They've all been inspired by what you did. Some of them were victims of crime. Some of them were bystanders who wish they'd acted. And some of them are just people who want to live in a world where courage isn't rare." He turned to the crowd. "This is Marcus Vale, and today we're here to thank him." One by one, people began to speak. A woman in her 40s stepped forward. "My daughter was being bullied at school. She saw your video and told me, if that man can stand up to bullies, so can I. She reported them. They were expelled. You saved her, Marcus." A young man with a prosthetic leg spoke next. "I'm a veteran. I came home from deployment feeling like I didn't matter anymore. Then I saw what you did for Harold. It reminded me that service doesn't end when you take off the uniform. I started volunteering at a shelter. I'm helping people again. Because of you." An elderly couple held hands as they addressed him. "We were mugged last year. No one helped us. We felt invisible. But your video reminded us that good people still exist. Thank you." Marcus stood there, overwhelmed, as person after person shared their stories. By the time the last person finished, his throat was too tight to speak. Harold leaned closer. "You think what you did was small, but it wasn't. It started something, Marcus. A movement. People are choosing to act instead of walking away because you showed them it's possible." Marcus finally found his voice. "I don't deserve this." "Yes," Harold said firmly. "You do." After the gathering, Marcus sat alone in the empty hall, staring at the rows of folding chairs. Elena Vasquez found him there 20 minutes later. "You okay?" she asked, sitting down beside him. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I didn't do anything special. I just did what felt right." "That's exactly why it matters," Elena said. "Because it wasn't calculated. It wasn't for fame or recognition. You acted because your conscience wouldn't let you walk away. And that's the kind of integrity people are desperate to see." Marcus looked at her. "What if I can't live up to it? What if I fail next time?" "Then you fail," Elena said simply. "But at least you'll have tried. And that's more than most people can say." She stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. "The world needs people like you, Marcus. Don't run from that." That night, Marcus wrote a letter of his own. He didn't know who he was writing to. Maybe Samuel, maybe Harold, maybe himself. But he needed to get the words out. "I spent years believing I'd failed, that I wasn't good enough, that I couldn't save the people who mattered most. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point isn't to save everyone. Maybe it's just to show up, to try, to refuse to walk away. I don't know if I'm a hero. I don't even know if I'm a good man. But I'm trying, and maybe that's enough." He folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside the photograph of Eduardo and Samuel Torres. Then he got on his bike and rode into the night, not running this time, but moving forward. 6 months after the Morrison Street incident, Marcus had settled into something resembling normalcy. The media attention had faded. People still recognized him occasionally, but the fervor had cooled. He was no longer the viral sensation, just a man who had done something decent and was trying to move on. He'd started working part-time at a motorcycle repair shop on the east side of town. The owner, a grizzled man named Frank, didn't care about Marcus's past. He just needed someone who knew their way around an engine and didn't mind long hours. Marcus liked the work. It was honest, physical, and didn't require him to talk much. He spent his days elbow-deep in grease, fixing bikes and listening to the rumble of engines. It felt good, simple. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Marcus almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Is this Marcus Vale?" a woman's voice asked. She sounded young, maybe early 20s, and her words were rushed, breathless. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is Claire Dawson. I saw what you did for that blind man, on Morrison Street." Marcus set down the wrench he was holding. "Okay, what can I do for you, Claire?" "I need help," her voice cracked. "My little brother, he's being bullied. Bad. These older kids at his school, they've been taking his lunch money, shoving him around, threatening him. He's 12 years old, and he's terrified to go to school." Marcus closed his eyes. "Have you talked to the school? The police?" "Yes, both. The school says they're investigating. The police say there's nothing they can do unless it escalates. But it's already escalated, Mr. Vale. Yesterday they cornered him in the bathroom and—" She stopped, her voice breaking. "They hurt him, and he won't tell me what they did. He just cries." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Where are you?" "We live in Glendale, about 20 minutes from the city. I don't know what to do. I don't know who else to call. But I remembered what you did for Mr. Brennan. And I thought, maybe. She trailed off, her hope fragile and desperate. "Give me the address," Marcus said. Marcus arrived at the Dawson home an hour later. It was a small house with peeling paint and a chain-link fence, nestled in a neighborhood that looked like it had seen better days. Claire was waiting on the porch, arms wrapped around herself despite the warm afternoon. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 22, with dark circles under her eyes and the exhausted look of someone carrying too much responsibility. When she saw Marcus pull up on his Harley, she stood quickly. "You came," she said, her voice thick with relief. "I said I would." Marcus dismounted and pulled off his helmet. "Where's your brother?" "Inside. He won't come out. He barely talks anymore." Marcus followed her into the house. The living room was cluttered, but clean, toys scattered across the floor alongside schoolbooks and laundry. A small boy sat on the couch, knees pulled to his chest, staring at nothing. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, and his hands were wrapped in bandages. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. "Lucas," Claire said gently. "This is Marcus. He's here to help." Lucas didn't look up. Marcus crossed the room and sat on the floor in front of the couch, making himself smaller, less intimidating. "Hey, Lucas. My name's Marcus. Your sister told me what's been happening." The boy's eyes flicked toward him for just a second, then away. "I know you're scared," Marcus continued, "and I know it feels like no one's listening. But I'm listening, and I want to help. Can you tell me who's doing this to you?" Lucas's lip trembled. "They'll hurt me more if I tell." "They won't," Marcus said firmly. "I promise." "You can't promise that." Lucas's voice was barely a whisper. "Nobody can stop them." Marcus leaned forward. "Lucas, look at me." The boy did, reluctantly. "I've stopped people like this before," Marcus said, "and I can stop them again. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Lucas stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. Lucas told him everything. The names of the bullies, where they hung out after school, the threats they'd made, the things they'd done that he was too ashamed to tell his sister. By the time he finished, Marcus's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. "Thank you for telling me," Marcus said quietly. "You're braver than you think." "I don't feel brave," Lucas said. "Brave people never do." Marcus stood. "I'm going to take care of this. And when I do, I want you to promise me something." "What?" "That you'll keep being brave. That you'll stand up for other kids who are going through what you went through. Can you promise me that?" Lucas nodded, tears streaming down his face. That afternoon, Marcus went to the school. He didn't make an appointment. He didn't call ahead. He just walked into the principal's office and sat down. The principal, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a tired expression, looked up from his desk. "Can I help you?" "My name is Marcus Vale," Marcus said. "And I'm here to talk about Lucas Dawson." The principal's face shifted. "Mr. Vale, I'm aware of the situation. We're handling it." "You're not," Marcus said flatly, "because Lucas is still being hurt, and nothing's changed. We've launched an investigation. Investigations don't stop fists." Marcus leaned forward. "I'm going to give you 48 hours to expel the kids who did this. If you don't, I'm going to the press. I'm going to tell them how this school failed to protect a 12-year-old boy, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows your name." The principal's face went pale. "Mr. Vale, that's a promise," Marcus said. He stood and walked to the door. 48 hours. 2 days later, the bullies were expelled. Lucas returned to school, and Claire called Marcus to thank him, her voice shaking with gratitude. "You saved my brother," she said. "No," Marcus replied. "He saved himself. I just gave him a reason to believe he could." A year after Morrison Street, Marcus Vale was no longer running. He still rode his Harley, still worked at Frank's shop, still lived in the same small apartment. But something fundamental had shifted. He wasn't trying to outrun his past anymore. He was carrying it forward, not as a burden, but as a responsibility. The calls kept coming, not every day, but often enough. People who had seen the video, who had read Elena's article, who needed help and didn't know where else to turn. Marcus couldn't help everyone, but he helped who he could. He reconnected Lucas with a youth mentorship program. He escorted an elderly woman to the bank after she'd been targeted by scammers. He showed up at a city council meeting to advocate for better street lighting in a neighborhood plagued by crime. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because he'd made a promise to himself to never walk past someone in trouble again. One afternoon, Marcus received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a handwritten note. Marcus, you don't know me, but you inspired me to start keeping track of the people I help. Small things, mostly. Holding doors, giving directions, listening when someone needs to talk. This journal is for you, so you can remember every person you've helped, every ripple you've started, because you matter, Marcus, and what you do matters. A friend? Marcus opened the journal. The first page was blank. He picked up a pen and wrote, Harold Brennan, Morrison Street, the day I stopped running. That evening, Harold called. Marcus, I have something I need to tell you, he said. What's that? I'm starting a non-profit. We're going to train people in bystander intervention, how to step in when someone needs help, how to do it safely, and I want you to be part of it. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Harold, I'm not a public speaker. You're exactly what we need, Harold interrupted. You're proof that one person can make a difference, that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting in spite of fear. Marcus thought about Daniel, about Eduardo Torres, about Lucas Dawson and all the others whose lives had brushed against his in moments of need. Okay, he said finally. I'm in. 6 months later, Marcus stood on a stage in front of 200 people. He'd never imagined himself here, speaking publicly, sharing his story, being looked to as an example. But here he was. I'm not a hero, he began, his voice steady but quiet. I'm just someone who couldn't live with himself if I walked away. He told them about Morrison Street, about the blind man and the 3 bullies, about the choice he'd made in that moment, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. We live in a world where people are trained to look away, he said, to mind our own business, to assume someone else will help. But what if there is no someone else? What if it's just you? He paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd. I'm asking you to be that someone else, to step in when others step away, to choose courage over comfort, because the world doesn't need perfect heroes. It just needs people who are willing to try. The applause was thunderous, but Marcus didn't hear it. He was thinking about Daniel, about the promise he'd made to himself in the aftermath of loss to keep showing up. After the event, a young man approached him. He couldn't have been more than 18, with nervous eyes and a backpack slung over one shoulder. Mr. Vale, he said, I just wanted to say, I saw your video last year, and it changed me. I was being bullied and I was thinking about ending things, but then I saw you stand up for that blind man, and I thought maybe someone would stand up for me too. So I reached out, got help, and now I'm here. Because of you. Marcus's throat tightened. I'm glad you're here. Me too. The young man smiled, and for the first time, Marcus saw hope in his eyes. Real, unshakable hope. I want to be like you someday. I want to help people. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. You already are, by choosing to stay, by choosing to keep going. That's the hardest kind of courage there is. The young man nodded, blinking back tears, and walked away. Marcus watched him go, feeling the weight of every decision he'd ever made settle into something that felt less like guilt and more like purpose. That night, Marcus sat on the fire escape outside his apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena Vasquez. Saw the video from your talk today. You're doing something important, Marcus. Don't stop. He smiled and typed back, I won't. Another message came through, this one from Samuel Torres. My dad would be proud of you. I know I am. Marcus stared at that message for a long time. Then he opened the leather journal the anonymous sender had given him and flipped to the latest entry. Lucas Dawson, Glendale. The day I realized I wasn't running anymore. He added another line. Young man at the conference, name unknown. The day I understood that survival is its own form of heroism. Marcus closed the journal and looked up at the sky. The stars were faint, washed out by the glow of streetlights, but they were there, constant, enduring. He thought about the promise he'd made to himself after Daniel died, that he would never walk past someone in trouble again. He'd kept that promise, and in keeping it, he'd discovered something he hadn't expected. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about honoring it by showing up for the future. 3 months later, Harold's non-profit, called the First Step Initiative, officially launched. The organization trained community members in bystander intervention techniques, taught de-escalation strategies, and created support networks for victims of violence and intimidation. Marcus became one of the lead trainers. He didn't just teach tactics, he taught philosophy. He told people about the moment on Morrison Street when he'd made the choice to cross the road instead of looking away. He talked about fear, about doubt, about the voice in your head that tells you it's not your problem. That voice is lying, he told a room full of trainees one Saturday morning, because if you see someone in trouble and you do nothing, it becomes your problem anyway. It becomes the thing you carry with you. The moment you wish you could take back. A woman in the front row raised her hand. But what if we're not strong enough? What if we can't fight? You don't have to fight, Marcus said. Sometimes all it takes is standing there, being a witness, calling for help, letting someone know they're not alone. That's enough. The trainings grew. Word spread. Within 6 months, the First Step Initiative had chapters in 3 states. Within a year, it was national. Marcus never sought the spotlight. But people kept finding him anyway, and he kept showing up. 2 years after Morrison Street, Marcus received an invitation to speak at a national conference on community safety. He almost declined. Public speaking still wasn't comfortable, but Harold convinced him. You have something people need to hear, Harold said, and it's not about you. It's about the idea that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. So Marcus went. The conference was held in a massive convention center, and Marcus found himself standing backstage, listening to his introduction being read to an audience of over 1,000 people. His hands were sweating. His heart was pounding. Then he heard Harold's voice over the speakers. 2 years ago, I was robbed and left for dead on a street corner, and one man stopped. One man chose to act when everyone else chose silence. That man is here today. Please welcome Marcus Vale. The applause was deafening. Marcus walked onto the stage, squinting against the lights. He couldn't see the faces in the audience, just a sea of shadows. But he could feel them, their attention, their expectation, their hope. He took a breath and began. I used to think courage was something you were born with, that heroes were a different kind of people, braver, stronger, better. But I was wrong. He told them about Daniel Cortez, about the fire, about the guilt that had driven him to leave everything behind. I thought I'd failed, Marcus said. I thought that because I couldn't save one person, I'd never be able to save anyone. But then I met Harold Brennan, and I realized something. You don't have to save everyone. You just have to show up for one person, and then another, and another, until showing up becomes who you are. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. Daniel Cortez died because a building collapsed. I couldn't stop that, but I could stop 3 men from robbing a blind man. I could help a 12-year-old boy escape his bullies. I could stand here today and tell you that the world isn't broken. It's just waiting for people like you to fix it. The audience was silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of confusion, but the reverent silence of understanding. So I'm asking you, Marcus continued, his voice steady now, the next time you see someone in trouble, whether it's a stranger on the street or a co-worker being harassed or a kid being bullied, don't walk away. Take that first step. Be the person who shows up, because the world doesn't need more heroes. It just needs more people who refuse to look away. The applause began slowly, then swelled into a standing ovation. Marcus stood there, overwhelmed, as 1,000 people rose to their feet. But he wasn't thinking about the applause. He was thinking about Daniel, about Eduardo Torres, about every person who had ever made the choice to act in spite of fear. This is for you, he thought. All of you. After the conference, Marcus walked outside into the cool evening air. He found a bench near the parking lot and sat down, letting the noise of the city wash over him. His phone buzzed. Another text from Eleanor. "You were incredible up there. Seriously. This is your calling, Marcus." He smiled and typed back, "Maybe. But I'm still just a guy on a bike." Elena responded immediately, "No, you're a guy on a bike who changed the world. Don't forget that." Marcus pocketed his phone and looked up at the sky. The stars were clearer tonight, brighter. He thought about the ripple effect, how one action on Morrison Street had somehow led to this moment, to this movement, to thousands of people learning how to be brave. He thought about the promise he'd made to himself after Daniel's death, and he realized finally that he'd kept it. Not perfectly, not without stumbling, but he'd kept it, and that was enough. 5 years after Morrison Street, Marcus Vale stood in front of a small gravestone in a cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The marker read, "Daniel Cortez, firefighter, brother, hero. 1985-2023. Marcus knelt and placed a hand on the cool stone. "I don't know if you can hear me," he said quietly, "but I wanted you to know I kept my promise. I didn't give up. I didn't walk away. And I'm still trying every day." He paused, his voice breaking. "I couldn't save you, Daniel, but I've saved others. Because of you. Because you taught me what it means to show up, even when it costs everything." Marcus stood and wiped his eyes. He looked out at the rows of headstones, each one marking a life, a story, a promise kept or broken. Then he walked back to his Harley, started the engine, and rode into the sunset. Not running from anything, but moving toward something, toward the next person who needed help, toward the next promise to keep. Because that's what heroes do. Not the ones in movies or comic books, but the real ones. The ones who ride motorcycles and work in repair shops and carry their grief like a second skin. They show up. They keep their promises. And they remind the world that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act in spite of it. Thank you for watching this story from beginning to end. If Marcus's journey inspired you, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss stories of real courage and moral action. Drop a comment below telling us, what promise are you keeping? We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, remember, the world doesn't need more heroes. It just needs more people who refuse to look away.